Starship Troopers is a science fiction novel written by Robert A. Heinlein. Set in a distant future in which Earth has united under the quasi-militaristic banner of the Federation, the story follows Johnny Rico, a young man who decides to join the Mobile Infantry, an elite military unit which operates across the galaxy, and who inadvertently becomes entangled in an interplanetary war against the bug-like arachnids. Although a military adventure first and foremost, the book can perhaps best be described as a coming-of-age story, as Rico matures from a privileged and naive teenager into a highly trained and disciplined officer of the Mobile Infantry.
Do you get me? We get you, sir!
Although the novel has remained popular since its original release in 1959, I imagine most of you are more familiar with these shots from its 1997 movie adaptation by director Paul Verhoeven.
I'm doing my part too.
Although resembling Heinlein's work in some areas, Verhoeven essentially took a sledgehammer to the source material and transformed the former serious tale into a satirical action movie.
Citizen rule, people making a better tomorrow.
His reasoning? He hated it. According to him, the society of the Federation was both jingoistic, militaristic, and worst of all, promoted fascism.
Where we were also fighting with the book. Because the book of Robert Heinlein, one of the, at that time, important science fiction writers, is militaristic and fascist.
As such, Verhoeven strongly disavowed and decided to poke fun at Heinlein and all the aforementioned isms with his movie adaptation. However, after its release, few seemed to understand the director's intent. Some fully embraced the film as a cool science fiction action movie, while others ironically criticized it for promoting the very militarism and ideology which it set out to ridicule.
It was bashed because it was accused of being neo-fascist or neo-Nazi.
The problem seemed to stem from the fact that Verhoeven simply failed to comprehend the source material, which does tend to happen when you only read 2 single chapters of the book you're supposed to make an adaptation of. In recent years, creators like PewDiePie and Red Letter Media have attempted to correct the record by highlighting the movie's intended but flawed critique of Heinlein's worldview and how and why this was originally misunderstood.
It's basically a parody that got misunderstood, and it still misunderstood what it was trying to parody. So are we back at the source material? I'd never seen anything like this. It's so weird, it's so confusing.
Sargon of Akkad in turn has argued that the society in Starship Troopers does not even promote fascism to begin with.
Well, it is true that it gives you fascist imagery because of Paul Verhoeven not understanding it either. It doesn't give you much in the way of fascist ideology.
Regardless, the point being is that this discussion, kickstarted by Verhoeven's confused misinterpretation of the story, has focused almost solely on the political dimension, but has largely obscured the true archetypal core of the story. Although certainly envisioning an idealized society, Heinlein also, and perhaps primarily, wrote Starship Troopers to reintroduce modern readers to several age-old principles of leadership and personal responsibility. In fact, it does both these things so well that the book has been on the US military's reading list for decades. As I will argue, it is exactly this archetypal core that best explains Starship Troopers' continued popularity, and as such functions as the very essence of its timeless and universal relevance.
The exact words of the text. But do you understand it? Do you believe it?
But how can we pinpoint these principles, and what is it that we can learn from them? For this, we need to turn to perhaps the most famous contemporary authority on the subject of leadership, retired Navy SEAL Commander Jocko Willink.
Lead yourself and your team and the people in your life. Lead them all to victory.
Jocko has written several critically acclaimed books on this topic, derived from his experiences as a commander during the Iraq War. With Jocko's guiding hand, this video essay will identify 3 key leadership principles that we can take away from Starship Troopers, and explore how we can implement those truths into our daily lives. So without further ado, let's get after it.
Yes, sir!
Principle number 1, extreme ownership. The foundational principle on which all other leadership principles are built is what Jocko calls extreme ownership. In this view, the true leader not only takes responsibility for himself, he also willingly chooses to take responsibility for the well-being of others.
the best leaders and the best troops were the ones that took ownership of everything in their world. Not just the things they were responsible for, but for every challenge and obstacle that impacted their mission.
Like Jocko, Heinlein puts this principle at the center of his story, as Rico is asked to explain the difference between a civilian and a citizen.
A citizen accepts personal responsibility for the safety of the body politic, defending it with his life. A civilian does not.
In a society of Starship Troopers, only those who volunteer to serve, or in other words take responsibility for the safety of humanity, are allowed the right to vote and run for office. In the Federation, taking extreme ownership is seen as the greatest virtue. Moreover, the citizen who embodies it has not only made the safety of others his primary responsibility, he has also accepted that he is responsible for the actions of those around him. The leader who takes extreme ownership acknowledges that the buck stops with him, no matter what.
When something went wrong, they cast no blame. They made no excuses. They took ownership of the problem and fixed it.
Although only marginally represented in the movie, this view is lavishly evoked in the book. First, Rico is demoted during boot camp for something his squad did while he wasn't even around. Not long thereafter, the point is hammered home even further when his drill instructor Zim takes responsibility for the fact that one of his recruits managed to hit him in the face, and as a result was court-martialed, flogged, and given a dishonorable discharge. "I wish to heaven there was some way for me to take that flogging myself, sir. You'd have to take your turn, I outrank you," answers the captain. However, neither you nor I can take it for him, even though the fault was ours, because the regiment has to see what happens when 9080 is violated. Our fault, but his lumps. Finally, this principle is taken to its absolute extreme when a recruit who deserted boot camp was found to have murdered a girl. The MI take care of their own, no matter what. Dillinger belonged to us. He was still in our roles, even though we didn't want him, even though we should have never had him, even though we would have been happy to disclaim him. He was a member of our regiment. We couldn't brush him off and let a sheriff 1,000 miles away handle it. The regimental record said that Dillinger was ours, so taking care of him was our duty.
Would you like to know more?
In the mobile infantry, everyone is functionally responsible for everyone and everything, no matter the rank. As such, an MI does not need to be coerced into service because he has taken extreme ownership. The root of our morale is everybody works, everybody fights. An MI doesn't pull strings to get a soft, safe job. There aren't any. All soft and safe jobs are filled by civilians. That gold-bricking private climbs into his capsule certain that everybody, from general to private, is doing it with him. This is why he enters the capsule, even though he may not be conscious of it. All that holds us together is an idea, one that binds more strongly than steel, but its magic power depends on keeping it intact. The leader who embodies this principle will see the same behavior mirrored back to him by his subordinates.
Unlike a team where no one takes ownership of the problems, and therefore the problems never get solved, with us, everyone took ownership of their mistakes. Everyone took ownership of the problems. And when a team takes ownership of its problems, the problems get solved.
In short, take extreme ownership. Principle number 2, stay humble. A leader cannot afford to become arrogant or too good to do menial tasks. He is not to inflate himself unduly in front of his subordinates. The true leader checks his ego, no matter his rank or level of expertise, and stays humble. In the MI, the officer's life belongs to his men. He does not live for his own glory nor for his own safety. When in doubt, he is to consider the opinions of his closest subordinates, or in this case, his platoon sergeant. He's probably older than you are, more drops under his belt, and he certainly knows his team better than you do. Since he isn't carrying that dreadful, numbing load of top command, he may be thinking more clearly than you are. Ask his advice. You've got one circuit just for that. It won't decrease his confidence in you. He's used to being consulted. If you don't, he'll decide you're a fool, a cocksure know-it-all, and he'll be right. However, staying humble does not equate willingly losing one's self-confidence. You don't have to take his advice. Whether you use his ideas or whether they spark some different plan, make your decision and snap out orders. The only thing that can strike terror in the heart of a good platoon sergeant is to find that he's working for a boss who can't make up his mind. Checking the ego also means that one is to lead by example and not feel too elevated to do the tasks that nobody wants to do.
In life, you are going to have to do things that you don't want to do. Maybe things that you don't think you should have to do. Things that offend your precious ego.
A big moment for growth for Rico as an aspiring officer is when he offers his mechanics a helping hand. The true leader is not afraid to get his hands dirty every once in a while, but is simultaneously careful to maintain the appropriate distance to his subordinates. The leader who manages to take both extreme ownership and stay humble becomes the type of person who people look up to.
If I cared that much about how clean the toilets were, people knew I would do a good job with even more important assignments. After a short period of time, I got those more important assignments. But it was humility that opened the door for me.
In the case of Starship Troopers, this is best embodied by the character of Lieutenant Ratchak. In the words of Rico, the lieutenant was father to us, and loved us and spoiled us, and was nevertheless quite remote from us aboard ship, and even dirtside, unless we reached dirt via a drop. But in a drop, well, you wouldn't think that an officer could worry about every man of a platoon spread out over 100 square miles of terrain. But he can. He can worry himself sick over each one of us. Besides that, you knew with utter and absolute certainty that, as long as you were still alive, the lieutenant would not get into the retrieval boat without you.
So I hear your lieutenant's a real nutbuster.
No one talks about the lieutenant that way.
So remember,
keep your ego in check and stay humble.
Principle number 3, discipline equals freedom. This may sound counterintuitive at first, but according to Jocko Willink, it is only through discipline that we can attain true freedom.
Discipline might appear to be the opposite of freedom, but in fact, discipline is the path to freedom.
Without discipline, we can't get done what needs to get done, or it will take much longer than need be, slowing us down in whatever it is we set out to achieve. Similarly, without discipline, mistakes are made on the battlefield, which restrict a leader from achieving his mission. Without discipline, members of a team cannot rely on each other to have their backs. And although Verhoeven's Starship Troopers shows discipline as either being tyrannical during training or being entirely absent during actual combat, Heinlein goes to great lengths to display the vital importance of this principle in the book. For instance, it is explained how only 15% of recruits of the mobile infantry actually make it through boot camp. However, Rico emphasizes that the toughness of the training and its drill instructors are in no way without purpose. It was too scheduled, too intellectual, too efficiently and impersonally organized to be cruelty for the sick pleasure of cruelty. Its immediate purpose was to get rid of, run right out of the outfit, those recruits who were too soft or too babyish ever to make mobile infantrymen. It accomplished that in droves.
You son from 1248, you grab your gear, you take a stroll down Washout Lane. Do you get me? Sir, yes, sir! Emphatic.
Moreover, recruits in the MI are trained to use all manner of weapons, from a throwing knife all the way to a small atomic bomb. We're trying to teach you to be dangerous to the enemy, dangerous even without a knife. An MI is always on the bounce, and never out of the fight, always ready to adapt to changing circumstances, and ready to apply the necessary force to achieve his objective, whether that be the thrust of a knife or the firing of a nuclear weapon. And in contrast to the supposed tactics or lack thereof as seen in the movie, the MI in the book operate with almost mathematical precision, speed, and efficiency, as they maintain standardized battle formations, apply the precise amount of force necessary, and extract at a designated time and place. In the same way, it is this emphasis on strict discipline and mutual responsibility which provides the mobile infantry with the freedom to rapidly deploy and redeploy on a moment's notice. However, a leader should not want to transform his men into unthinking robots, but if rightly ordered, the leader who imposes a balanced degree of standardized discipline both on himself and on his subordinates will generate the necessary freedom, confidence, and the ease of mind to be creative when circumstances change or plans inevitably fall apart. This careful balance is exactly what enables Rico to act swiftly and adapt rapidly during the climax of the story. During this final battle, Rico's clear-headed leadership helps avoid his team from getting wiped out, and ultimately play a pivotal role in the successful completion of his mission, to capture a brain bug.
It's a fray!
So remember,
make discipline part of your daily life, and your daily life will get better.
To conclude, I hope this video has evidence that it is far too reductive to view Starship Troopers merely through a political lens, and it certainly would be a mistake to reduce its message to a laughable propagation of jingoism, militarism, and fascism. This is not to invalidate the debate surrounding Heinlein's proposed ideal society altogether, but it is to emphasize that at its core, its story is much more than that. In essence, Starship Troopers' true fundamental attraction is found in its evocation of both universal principles of leadership and in its general reappreciation of timeless values such as duty, honor, and responsibility in the pathway towards living a meaningful life.
Come on, you apes! You wanna live forever!
We need you all. Service guarantees citizenship.
Hi everyone, Thomas here. If you like this video, please do leave a like, comment, and subscribe. We've been away for quite some time, so all of that engagement really helps us to get back into the good graces of the YouTube algorithm. So it's much appreciated. If you'd like to help us out even more, you can head on over to PayPal to leave us a one-time donation. Link in the description below. Thanks guys.